Welcome to Empower 2024. I'm excited to share with you all one of my favorite webinars from earlier this year, where my partner in crime, Anthony Offredi, and I discussed key trends and challenges facing the manufacturing industry and how Quickbase is uniquely positioned to help. During our chat, we discussed the rapid changes in the manufacturing workforce, the need to do more with less, and the emerging business challenges that are being created as a result. We got a lot of great feedback on this session, and I'm sure you'll get a lot of value from it. If you have any questions during this presentation, drop your questions and comments in the chat. We'll be right back at the end of the session to answer your questions live. Let's dive in.
You know, the workforce has been changing and declining faster than it ever has since the 70s. And there's really a few things that are playing into that, right? So the first thing is, we see that 95% of manufacturers are struggling with talent shortages and productivity issues. Anthony has really interesting insights as to why that is. I'd also like to add on that last bullet point, 78% of manufacturing leaders are evaluating technologies that will help them increase operational efficiency. So you've got a scenario where we're struggling to find the resources that we need, the human resources that we need to effectively run our manufacturing floors, which means that there is a higher value on the technology and the problems that we solve with technology. Anthony, how have you seen this play out in your experience?
Well, I can tell you one of the big issues that I was struggling with, and all of my peers and coworkers have been struggling with in the manufacturing floor is talent acquisition, talent retention. There was a lot of things that happened. It was a problem beforehand, before COVID, but it was manageable. And what I mean by that is when you have a 30-year-old vet or 30-year veteran in the manufacturing floor, that person was always there and was able to transition their knowledge, transition their experiences and skills over to a newer person. In manufacturing, we hire in large groups. Like every 10 years, there's like a whole introduction of a new workforce. And what happens during that period is, in the past, we're able to transition those skills and have a little bit of time to hand it over. During COVID, what happened was a lot of the 30 years veterans retired out. So that transition period never happened. And then on top of that, we came back from COVID. Then all of a sudden we're bringing in a new workforce at the same period of time. And that new workforce is coming from a different mental state. They're coming from a .com industry mindset. And what does that mean to everybody here? Well, showing up 9 to 5 and working in a factory is a fantastic career. I have done it. I lived it. However, .com has brought a lot more flexibility and a lot more options that has really strained the manufacturing workforce, because you're able to set your own schedule doing an Uber. You're able to set your own schedule doing DoorDash, or one of the other applications that is available that's available to the newer workforce. It was never there in the past. Now it's here. So we're competing with that at the same point in time. So you're seeing a transient workforce that may want to try something out in manufacturing, but still wants the flexibility of what is offered to them in other industries. And that's where that 78% of manufacturing leaders are looking for new technologies that are going to assist with that. Assist with high absenteeism, assist with transient workforce, assist with skills and certification tracking, because it's a big part of what wasn't there before. Now it is, and they're addressing it. So that's my 2 cents on it.
Yeah, so just to recap, you had the veterans retire out.
Yep.
You got a new wave of individuals who have different expectations in terms of how the company, how the organization leverages technology to make them more efficient at their jobs. How has that piece changed the conversations that you're having when you think about the use cases that folks are looking to solve with Quickbase?
Well, that's a great question. So, okay, so nowadays with this .com industry, folks that are, let me talk about two different examples here. So we have the classic manufacturing work floor, where you go to work, you're working on an assembly line, or you're working in a production cell. And then you have, let's just say something a little bit in the future. In my experience on Amazon with Last Mile, you're having two different sets of workforces there, but if they're the same age group. And what I mean by that, you're having a new workforce comes in, you're coming in, but the difference between the two is that the Amazon workforce has mobile technologies, and that last mile folks are all connected to the operation. They're connected through the machine or the equipment. When it comes to shop floor, not necessarily. There might be one desktop that's shared amongst 10 or 12 team members. So that is the primary difference, and we can talk about that as in the future slides. But that's one of the biggest differences between the two that I think manufacturing can learn from.
You mentioned that cognitive load or cognitive overload. I think
overload, yeah.
I think anybody can really relate to that. You know, I think about it in my world, and the stakes aren't nearly as high as on the manufacturing floor. So that really it compounds the problem where you're saying, oh, well, there's so much that I need to learn. It makes me less efficient at my job, right? And there's real world implications to that.
Absolutely.
So here's the summary, right? We've got a scenario where we've got a lot of data, a lot of machines that we're keeping track of, a lot of people that we're keeping track of, and we have too many disconnected and manual tools. That's actually impacting the workforce, right? Where we're having either folks that aren't fully trained and skilled at the work that needs to be done, running into compliance issues, or just being able to know who's certified in what, right? I built an app with a car parts manufacturer, and we built them a shift schedule. They needed to say, okay, we need to have at least one person that is certified in these 8 different areas per shift. So you can't just fill one body with another. You need to make sure that these people have the appropriate skill set to fill that gap.
100%.
So that's it sounds like that just continues to be more and more of a need, right? And as I talk to Anthony and manufacturers, what I realize is, you don't necessarily, it's not that you have a scrap tracking problem or a shift management problem. You've got a gray work problem, right? And what is gray work? This is where Quickbase really comes in handy. So we talk to company after company that has too many systems that are disparate, don't talk to one another. They might do one thing very well, but they might do 80% of that, and the other 20% you're left managing in an Excel file, right? Or you're left searching through an email, right? So that's that gray work. It's the stuff that you kind of below the line that you don't see, but that's the 10 to 20 hours per week that we see folks running into. And this is what we're trying to solve, right? Go ahead, Anthony. I know you got a couple of thoughts here.
So no, this is I love this slide. Thank goodness that people can actually take thoughts and make something creative like this, because it's the iceberg, right? So what you're seeing with the iceberg is you only see 10%, and that 10% is the stuff that the directors and the general managers see is the output of everything that is being done. But 90% of that is that gray area. It's dealing with the spreadsheets, the Word documents, and all of those databases that we talked in a few prior slides earlier. That drives that 90%. And what happens is it gets buried in what we consider these hidden factory costs, these production losses, that 20 to 30% inefficiency percentage that you're seeing. Then you have, unfortunately, what you're having is that there's these unfortunate supervisors in manufacturing that maybe raise their hand and said they know Excel. Well, guess what? Now you're a data analyst over on the side pulling all of this disparate information together. and learning Excel and pivot charts. And now you're just correlating data rather than actually making your processes and products much better. So this is exactly it. This is the easiest way to explain gray work for sure. Let's talk manufacturing. So manufacturing channel overview. It really honestly doesn't matter what you're making, if you're making a blender, if you're making an airplane, or if you're making an automotive part. Manufacturing is going to follow the same approach. Why is that? It's because it loves standard processes. It loves best practices. It thrives upon doing the same thing repeatedly every single time. So why is that? Well, we have these governing societies that all these manufacturers belong to. I bet in the audience that everyone's going to belong to Society of Manufacturing Engineers and probably maybe the mechanical engineering group. They all know ISO. They all know Lean Six Sigma or maybe Toyota quality systems. But it's those governing bodies that are setting the standards that everyone subscribes to so that they can get better. They're all agreed upon and then they're adopted. But how they're adopted is what's driving some of the gray work and some of these disparate systems throughout all of manufacturing. So let's kind of like dive into that. So industry standards in manufacturing, we're going to have common processes. We're going to have quality control methods. We're going to have our PFMEAs. We're going to have all of that stuff that are common processes that are fairly standard no matter who you're working for. You could be working for Ford one day and then you could be working for Nestle on the other day, but it's going to follow the same type of methods no matter where you are. And that's the reason why they train manufacturing engineers and that stuff in schools. Lean manufacturings like Kaizens, like fishbone diagrams, like 5Y, they're all standards, but they're the standards that were created by those governing bodies, and then they're handed out to you in a PDF format or an Excel template. And those governing bodies also train you on the continuous improvement practices. What is the best way to do something or problem solve? And that is cross-pollinated across all of manufacturing. And it culminates into standard industry KPIs. We have jobs per hour, or maybe jobs per minute, depends on how fast your line rate is. We have hours per unit, a great financial KPI to tell you how many labor minutes it actually is taking to make a product. Then you have first time capability. Am I making the part right the first time? You want to track that. You want to make sure that you are doing that. Otherwise, you end up with repair or worse, warranty. And then you want the biggest one of them all, where all of these other disparate KPIs are coming together, is OEE, operational equipment effectiveness, where you can take your first time capability, you can take your operator performance, and then you can take your machine availability, combine that up, and then see where you're at. So all of these standards in manufacturing are kind of driving a gray work because they want those KPIs. Manufacturing wants to get better. So let's talk about how these things are captured. So let's talk about the plant floor and what that looks like. So we talked about the cognitive load before, and that cognitive load or overload, that's much better terminology, it is really captured in I'll talk about these big bubbles, but there's probably 90 little bubbles that are inside of this. So we have our MES systems, our manufacturing execution systems. Those systems, if you're using an Allen Bradley Rockwell system like Factory Talk, or maybe you're using a Dassault system, or maybe you're using a GE Prophecy, it doesn't matter. All of that equipment data is captured inside of your MES system. And typically, it's disparate. It's a massive system. It has to have all that transactional information between your automation and the signals that are going back and forth to make sure that a person can respond to a signal. So just imagine that one bubble and it's running itself, and it's maybe one of the backbones of a facility. Then you have your data analytics systems. Your industrial engineers are going to be part of that. Your plant controllers are going to be part of that. Your Tableaus, your Power BIs, all of your click senses are part of that data analytics systems to make sure that, hey, at the end of the month, what does our roll-up look like? So you have all of that. Now, those pull from some of these systems, but you really can't work inside of them. Not like an MRP or ERP system. So maybe you're running an SAP, helping you understand what your inventory is like, maybe helping you with your supply chain. All of those systems now, these are very large building blocks, the bricks in the wall, so to speak, of a manufacturing facility. And then you'll have other solutions that they're going to have to integrate with. If you're in maintenance, you're going to have your own solution. And that own solution may be a Maximo. It might be an Infor EAM solution. Whatever it may be, you're going to have these direct solutions that have been implemented inside your facility. Maybe they're custom built. You might be a custom built quality control program that you brought in to help out with your manufacturing KPIs, your first time capabilities. Those direct solutions probably don't link to the other three. So what does that mean? That means that 90% of the iceberg really comes into Microsoft Office. And that's where you have each one of your production staff pulling down these disparate data sources, these CSV files. It's all fragmented. Every day they got to come in, that 10 hours a week, every day they got to come in and they got to pull all that down. They got to make sure that they're trending in the right way. It's overload. And that is the gray work that is fragmented and inefficient. So now we set the stage on the digital landscape in manufacturing. We understand why it's getting there. So let's talk about what it all adds up to. So we just talked about that the plant floor is dominated by Excel and PowerPoint. It just leaves the more gray work, because what ends up happening is that you'll have an Excel sheet and it'll sit on somebody's desktop and then it gets emailed around. Well, guess what ends up when that happens? It becomes a lagging indicator. And what I mean by lagging indicator, it's not real time. It could be 2 or 3 days old. So that means you have to go back in and you have to update that spreadsheet, or God forbid, if somebody's missing or absent, you have to go and recreate the spreadsheet. So what does that mean to the factory floor? Or what does it mean to the overall company? Because they're not all syncing up together. It's because it's at 10 hours a week on a 40-hour work week, but manufacturing never has a 40-hour work week. Okay, we all know that. But on a 40-hour work week, it's a 25% productivity cost. That's your hidden factory right there. And I live that. So I'm sure there are more people in the audience that feel the same way. Trying not to preach to the choir, but this is why we're here today and why we're kind of explaining what we're going to.
But this is critical because that gray work is almost built into the manufacturing space, right? Because you've got your MES systems, you have your ERPs, and then you've got these governing bodies that you need to adhere to that might be changing the rules sometimes on you. So it kind of, you default to these Excel, Word, PowerPoint types of tools, but that's when you start chasing information. So absolutely. I think you've done a really good job of articulating the problem, right? So now let's talk about the solution. I love it. Okay,
let's talk about solutions. Yeah. It's my favorite. This is why I'm so passionate and why I love what we do, is because there is a solution. There is. So how does data to decision look like on the shop floor? So just to give a quick recap of like how it actually works. So I'm going to break it down with 3 simple words. See, connect, and control. See, you want to see the KPIs. You want to see what your jobs per hour, your first time capability is, because that gives you an idea of what the data is. Like what is happening today or this hour or this minute. And then you want to do something, you want to connect that. And what I mean by connect it is that you want to attach that to one of the lean methods that the governing societies have taught us. You want to connect that to maybe a 5Y. Maybe you want to connect that to a continuous improvement method. Maybe it's a TWTTP, the way we teach people. All of those type of situations or lean tools are going to help you get better. So you're connecting the KPI to a lean method, and then you want to control it. And what I mean by control is that you want to start trending that chart. You want to start putting a Kaizen together with your PDCA, your Plan, Do, Check, Act. And that requires, the C, Connect, and Control requires a continuous feedback loop. And with that continuous feedback loop, that's how you get better. And that's how you make your decisions, through seeing the KPIs, connecting them to lean methods, and then controlling them with trend charts in a Kaizen type of format or a problem-solving format. That's what it looks like, the data to decision. And that's where Quickbase is different than all the rest. And I don't want to sound too salesy, but this is exactly why I bought Quickbase back in 2018, is because of this reason right here.
What are the types of problems that we solve for customers? This is a bit of a high level. Anthony's going to drill down into more specific use cases that we help manufacturers with. But, at a high level, when we talk to companies that really get excited about Quickbase, they're typically solving these types of problems, right? So first is run your most complex projects. We see a lot of times where people have different types of projects, right? They might have bigger, smaller projects, and they want to be able to manage the deliverables associated with those in one place, right? That's a very common use case for Quickbase. Tracking the status of stuff is usually a pretty good reason that you could leverage Quickbase. Managing and tracking resources. We talked about that from a skills perspective, from a time perspective. Very popular way to leverage Quickbase. Modernize your unique business processes. As I mentioned, a lot of times companies come to us because they can't find something that does everything they need it to do, right? It might be able to do 80% of it, but that other 20% that's really important, maybe you can't do. So that's when you're back to the gray work. You're back to exporting stuff into Excel or a CSV file. So last couple on here is administer compliance policies and procedures, and then the install and deliver products and services. Obviously, a really important piece to the manufacturing group. But one of the things that I like to say about Quickbase, if you can say it out loud, you can build it, right? So as you're starting to orient yourself to the content that we're sharing, and you're starting to pick up on some areas of potential gray work in your organization, just keep in mind that Quickbase is a tool that enables you to solve that problem the way you need it to be solved, without having to, buy something off the shelf and maybe tweak it to your process to that system. So Anthony, back over to you. We've got a few use cases on the slide. I'd love to have you talk about a few of those.
Okay, so to break that down from the work or how to explain it down to where we see it, to the actual shop floor. So let's start from left to right. So continuous improvement, how to run a complex project. So everywhere you see a dot, for the audience out there, everywhere you see a dot is something that we have built for clients in manufacturing, and that some of these are actually downloadable. And Freddie's going to talk about that at the last little bit of the presentation. So let's talk. So we pre-build applications. So we have a Kaizen application, which is great. We have a job skill and job cover matrix, which we're going to talk about. You're going to see a live demo here in a minute. We have an OEE application that's built into our CMMS program and application solution. It's a full-blown CMMS solution that you can download. We have, to go back to your compliance, big part of manufacturing is OSHA. OSHA reporting, OSHA forms is a pre-built application. And then we have project Gantt, timelines, new product introduction, what happens to your factory floor in July, what happens to your factory floor during Christmas holiday. Can tell you right now, all that new equipment's coming in. We have not only do we have a use case for that, but we have an application that you can download. So with that, I want to go to the next slide. Let me click on the next. Thank you, Freddie. And let's talk about the dynamic team, all those people that are integrating with those applications that are before. So dynamic work management is what all these people are interacting with, right? They're all doing different pieces of the larger puzzle to make a factory run. So if you look at this, the gray work, or I'm just going to call it out, is Microsoft Office, is all those dotted lines. You're emailing the business leader down to the ops technologist, down to the frontline worker, maybe if they have email. But all of that is done inside of your Outlook or your Excel or maybe PowerPoint. That's not necessarily how to get better. It is not conducive to dynamic work management. That's the reason why Quickbase is out here to solve it. So I also want to bring out one key point on this, is that because of this model and because of we haven't gone through a digital transformation for dynamic work management, we're asking the new workforce to utilize 1990s standards when they're accustomed to 2023-24 standards, which is the .com industry. Everything needs to be connected. The expectation for a new workforce employee is that they're connected to the machine, they're connected to the operation through their mobile device. And that is the differentiation on how to improve your continuous improvement work cycle and dynamic work management and eliminate the gray work. The other thing is that to help out with absenteeism in the transient workforce that we're seeing right now. Prior COVID, we had an absentee rate. Post-COVID, absentee rate is higher for a variety of different reasons, but kind of covered those before. But how do you protect for that, or how do you work with that? And that goes back to what we consider job covering, making sure that you have the base minimum people trained in any job or operation, so that you can cover down, like you said before. That's all built into that shop floor management, and there's a whole lot of other things in there: scrap tracking, shop floor, end of shift letters, and actions and follow-ups. All of that's built into shop floor management. Now I want to bring on one key component to CMMS. Not only does it bring in all of those disparate data sources, it also can calculate OEE. And then the third thing is that, what I was going to say. Oh, data analyzer. Geez, almost forgot. So just like everyone else, we have a data analyzer, AI, machine learning component inside of Quickbase. So if you wanted to have if you have a large data set of machines and their maintenance history, predictive maintenance is a possibility if we have a large enough data set. Obviously, we need a large enough data set to do that, but we have that capability inside of Quickbase. So back to you, Freddie.
And I'll talk about Mezzo. Mezzo is not too far from us here in Massachusetts. They're in like more of the Worcester area. I've had the privilege of actually meeting a couple of folks from Mezzo at our Empower conferences. But the big story for them was standardization, or the lack of standardization, when it came to fulfilling orders and aligning resources to those orders. They were scattered, and what that part of the problem that led to was the ability to properly train employees and make sure that they had the right resources available at the right time. So long story short, they built a suite of applications on Quickbase that allowed them to really manage their workforce, manage their orders, and led to an annual cost savings of $1 million from improvements and resource management and process improvements. So improved training and increased effectiveness through order management and standardization, ensured compliance with fast access to real-time data via our roles. I think that's one thing that maybe we didn't talk about enough is the roles and permissions that Quickbase provides, very granular detail, so that you can make sure that only the individuals that are supposed to see something can see it, right? This is a really valuable piece of Quickbase. So a couple of great examples. Again, we have many more. I think the sort of the take home is that, again, if you can say it out loud, you can build it. And we work with a lot of different companies to solve their unique business challenges.